Hello. Beep, 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 beep. Welcome to the court of the Edijester. On this glorious day, Kalukale, in which I have my tea as I'm ready to rub it at you. Well, good day yesterday, wasn't it? First off, congratulations to Moira Deeming, who has won her court case. £300,000 and counting. That's just the start, right? So well done, Moira. You know, love, fantastic. All right, Moira? So the utterly extraordinary against that ham, John Prosciutto. So that's the first thing, right? Which was the second bit of news, but the first thing. The primary bit of news is, of course, that we have got an indefinite puberty blocker ban from January. Very interesting speech from Wes Streeting, which he cobbled together. See what I did there? No, right, which... okay. From Wes Streeting. It's what they say, isn't it? It's what they say and what they don't say. In answering questions from some revolting child harm pushing folk, that's what I saw in Parliament. I'm very worried for the trans children. I'm very worried for... Oh, shut up. Right? There's no such thing as a trans child. No such thing as a trans child. There never was, never will be. Never will be. It's extraordinary to look back and think that really it was the recognition, or certainly it was the catalyst for my ongoing anger, was the damage to children. And the women rightly come at this and go, this is what's happened to the girls. This is ROGD. This is it was the majority girls who became that cohort. But my absolute vehemence and my absolute anger is aimed primarily at those who, since the very beginning of this nonsense, going right back into the 20th century, predated on feminine boys. That's where my anger truly lies. And you can guess that that's because I was a feminine boy. Camp as a row of tents. Ballet. Tap, can you imagine? I'm bloater now, I couldn't do it now. Ballet, tap, pas de deux all over the place. That's how I was when I was younger. Musical theatre. It's just extraordinary, but that's what I was. I learnt not to do it. I learnt not to be that once I went to secondary school, which was brutal. But you know, they'd have had me. They'd have had me. And they've had lots of me's since then. Lots of them. And we mustn't forget that what motivates an awful lot of this is the most profound homophobia. The most profound homophobia. And of course I would focus on that. There's plenty of women that are focusing on other things. That's me, I'm going to focus, if I can, on this, because it's the bit that's most personal to me. So the small shedding of tears that I did yesterday was for me, really. The me that wouldn't have been doing this now with you if what's happening to children now would have been happening to children then. They'd have had me. And I still think we are in a very sticky situation. Don't get me wrong. All power to Wes Streeting. All power to Wes Streeting for continuing this in the wake of some terrible hate from these awful, wicked people who at this point, push this, who are profoundly evil. Profoundly evil. And I would go along with that, profoundly stupid. Profoundly stupid. Because they'd have had me. I can't get past it. I can't get past it. And this is happening, and still happening, the sort of opening salvo, the sort of where does it start? You know, Mr. Menno's done about the train, and people have talked about how once they get on the pathway, it's game over. Where does it start? Well, now that we've got what we needed, which is an indefinite block on puberty blockers, we can start to ask that question. But what was interesting yesterday was the response by Wes Streeting, in which he said, be assured that this will go through a full ethics committee about the incoming trial. Now, I've read about this incoming trial, and I've read about what they intend to do, and I am not a medical person, but I'm of the opinion there is absolutely no way that this can pass an ethics committee. I can't see it doing so. And even if it did, we must then question the ethics committee, perhaps a court case, saying, right, you're not doing this until we get this to court because we think that the ethics committee is captured by trans rights activists and postmodern lunatics. Maybe that's what we do. But a significant victory that is in place until a review in 2027. And in that time, we've got those 2 years to change the mind of the public so that critical mass is reached on the whole entire nonsense of trans. So I have to sit back and think. I saw my warrior teachers yesterday. They're great, aren't they? They're great warrior teachers. They're doing all sorts of stuff. And they're all obviously very pleased about this, but we're all bothered by the same thing, which is that if this is where we are, we recognise now the hideous nature of the danger of puberty blockers to children. It is also unquestionable that we must recognise the hideous nature of the concept of trans. Full stop. So the question to me then becomes, in what possible world would there be a necessity to treat a mental illness or a morbidity such as, I'm in the wrong body, I'm not comfortable with my body? What could be the possible reasons that that should be anywhere near a school curriculum, let alone be the subject of an affinity group or a club? How is that now justifiable? How is it? And how do we begin to unpick that? People always said, that children don't know anything about gender identity until they're told about it. And I think that's absolutely true. They're inculcated into this. They're groomed. Children are groomed. Adults are conned. Children are groomed into this, right? Safeguarding across the board. That's what it is. In which case, how can safeguarding be being practiced in schools if schools are teaching that trans is an identity? It's not an identity. It never was. In fact, I would go so far as to say, and there's an interesting conversation to be had about this, that the word identity is the word of the therapeutic. And therefore, the concept of identity is an unneeded thing for the vast majority of people. There's no such thing. Absolute nonsense. And children don't know anything about that until they're told about it either. This is a profound psychosocial interference in the lives of children, and right now it's happening in schools across the country. Across the country. We do what now? What am I to do now? What do I do? Well, we've got the puberty blockers. What am I doing next? This is what I'm doing next. This is the important thing now, is to get people to understand that there is no such thing as trans. It is simply a made-up category, and you can stop being it by changing your hair colour and behaving yourself. We still have to stop these men going into schools and teaching, practicing their fetish, or dressed as what they think a woman is. We still have to shame these men out of the public square. We still have to do it. Who's here for that? Who's here for dealing with that? We still have to remove gender from the law. We still have to ensure gender identity never gets into the law. We still have to look at what is the teaching philosophy that has allowed this to creep into schools. That's what we need to be looking at. And the most important person in this ongoing fight is going to be the parent. Because it is the parent who's going to need to say to the school, you do this, you tell this to my child, and we're going to have a problem. It's the school that must answer to the parent. Because I do not think the government's going to come out and say that trans is a load of nonsense. They're not going to say get it out of the schools. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be there. And every school that recognises trans or force teams trans with LGB, with the concept of sexuality, or teach children that trans is anything but a cult based on a morbid psychological condition, that any school that does that is a safeguarding threat to a child. To me, when I was 8. To the effeminate boys they went after and will go after if we allow these ridiculous clinical trials to go forward. So yeah, I'm happy that we've closed the doors on puberty blockers and given us a pause to move forward. But I want to know what the rest of you are going to do. How do we shame this out of the public square? Completely. That's what I'm looking for now. Because that's what's left to do. That's what's left to do. All right, now you go well. Okay? Fantastic work, folks. Look at what you did. All right? And you should be proud of that. Very, very proud. Thank you. From 8-year-old me. I'll see you later.